He didn't tell us anything. She gets it from Shirley, or we don't get it. Good morning. Give you another minute or so to get settled. Get your coffee. No, I got to move. I can't stand there. I have to stand here. Okay, I will. I'm going to set my clock. I'm going to try to get you out of here a little bit early. I thought I'd get applause at that. Good morning, everyone. We're looking at the history. I love history. That's one reason Roger wrote me into teaching this class. I love history. I love the history of the Old Testament. I love history in general. On this day in 1881, a historical event occurred. Anybody tell me what it is? 1881. I'll give you a one-word hint, and tell me if you tell me what it is. You were born. I was born. Who said that? Which one said that? You missed it by a few years. I'll give you a one-word hint. Tombstone. You didn't get it from that? The shootout at the OK Corral happened on this day in 1881. Another one of my favorite movies is the movie Tombstone, which documents that shootout. The Earp Boys and Doc Holliday against the Clanton-McClaughry gang. 3 people ended up dead. You've got the hardest job in the world. I think she said she agreed with me. So, all right, but we're not going to talk about the gunfight at the OK Corral. We're going to talk about Old Testament history. And hey, Todd. I'm not working. I know I got power. Todd's going to go back here and do the magic. I was in IT, and we used to do stuff, and our boss, my boss, used to call us the wizards behind the curtain, and now we always thought that was a great compliment. He called us the wizards behind the curtain. I got it. Todd, the new wizard behind the curtain. Thank you, Todd. Okay, so what I'm going to do, we're going to take a walk through history pretty quickly, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to look at the history of Judah. We're going to catch up with the history of Judah, and then next week we're going to look at the history of Israel. So rather than going side by side, I'm going to take Judah. Next week, I'm going to take Israel. And here's Roger kind of talked about some of this last week. I'm just catching up. 874, Ahab became king. We all know about Ahab and everything that went on. He was king in Israel, Jehoshaphat in Judah. He co-reigned for a while, and then he became the sole king. Ahab married his daughter off, so the king of Israel married his daughter off to the king of Judah. Didn't work out very well for either one of them. To Jehoram. Then we get to 1853, Ahaziah becomes the king in Israel. 848, Jehoram becomes king in Judah. This will mess you up. 852, Jehoram becomes king in Israel. It's not the same Jehoram. These guys had duplicate names, and nobody was named Bob or Tommy or anything like that, but we have two Jehorams, one in Judah, one in Israel. Now we get into, when you see the yellow, I'm going to talk world history here, because now Roger talked about this last week. We're going to get into it more even next week. In 858, Shalmaneser III of Assyria started his campaign against Urartu, which is right above Assyria, and Damascus, which is below Assyria. You can talk about names. I mean, Shalmaneser is an odd enough name to begin with, but now there's three of them. So this is, we're going to call him Trey. I think we'll call him Trey. Okay. 841, Isaiah becomes the king in Judah. 841, again, Jehu exterminates the Ahab dynasty and becomes king in Israel. 841. Athaliah, who is a woman, murders all her grandsons. And she took a hold of the throne for a little while. Obviously, she's never a king, but she was over the throne for a little while. Then look at 841 again. We see Shalmaneser forces King Jehu of Israel to pay tribute. So now we got Shalmaneser up here in Israel. He's starting to exert some pressure here, and he forces Jehu of Israel to start paying him some money. Then we say where Joash becomes king in Judah. We're going to back up and pick up that in more detail later. 814, Jehoahaz becomes king of Israel. Now we get into the 8th century BC, and this is where, so now we're caught up here, and we're going to get in the 8th century BC. So this next century is very eventful for the Israelites. You know, David was like around 970 or so. Solomon, maybe 930 or so. So now we're down to about 800 BC. We've come a long way. So let's look at the world in 800 BC. We looked at it a few weeks ago. We looked at the world in 1000 BC. Now we're looking at the world in 800 BC. Here's the same old world. The world hasn't changed any. There's no more new countries. And so when we look at the power structure that's going on in the world, it's a little bit different. Now, I talked to you a few weeks ago about the Zhou dynasty in China, 1000 BC. It was probably the most powerful dynasty, most powerful country in the world, 1000 BC. Now we're at 800 BC. It's still a very powerful dynasty, most powerful dynasty in China, certainly, and is one of the most powerful dynasties in the world. But we're going to see things start to change a little bit here because Assyria. So 800 BC, we've already seen Shalmaneser. We'll go into that a little bit more detail. But Assyria is starting to exert its dominance, and Assyria has become one of the most powerful nations in the world at this point, rivaling the dynasty there in China. Now, there's another powerful nation beginning to exert here, and this here with the blue. So if you can see that little circle there, that is what? Greece. So now we're seeing Greece around the start of the 8th century start to gain power and exert power. And there's a bunch of little city-states. It starts off as a bunch of city-states. Eventually it keeps growing and growing. I'm going to show you a map on that a little bit later. And now we're getting another nation starting to build up. Coming in from this way. Anyone recognize that? It's Italy, Rome. So Rome, 800 BC, Rome is starting to get power. Now Rome, this is not the Roman Empire that we see during the day of Jesus. The Roman Empire we see in the day of Jesus will not get its strength until we get maybe around 100 BC or something. We see that empire rise and go for about 200, 250 years or so. But Rome is getting to be a very powerful country at this time. So we see the power is shifting around 800 BC. And a lot of it is centered right there in those three circles. Now, so 8th century in Israel, we see Jehoash becomes king in Israel around 798. Amaziah becomes king in Judah. Jeroboam becomes king in Israel, 793. We're going to talk a little bit more detail about all these as we go forward. Uzziah becomes king in Judah. Zechariah becomes king in Israel. So you can see, boom, a lot of things happening here. We get to that point in time. Now, 753, I was talking about 800, 753, Rome is founded by Romulus and maybe Remus. Anybody remember the story of Romulus and Remus? They are brothers. They are twin brothers. And their uncle killed their father and took over the power there in Rome. And these two babies were supposed to be killed, and the gods rescued them. And they were raised by what? Well, man, you guys know your history. I'm so proud of you. They were raised by wolves and became powerful. And then they got into argument with themselves about where we're going to put their power, where we're going to put our cities, like two brothers do. So really, when we look at history, Romulus is really the founder of Rome. Remus gets a little credit here, but Remus ends up getting killed, probably by one of Romulus' men, and Romulus is really the founder of Rome. So back in Israel, things are really going downhill quickly. Shallum assassinates Zechariah, and then later Menahem assassinates Shallum, and Judah, Jotham serves as a co-regent. Now, 750, we get into Greece. I'm going to show you a map of that in a minute. See, a lot of little city-states in that area. A lot of little city-states, and they're beginning to consolidate. They're beginning to get a lot of power. Now, in 750, Homer writes what? The Iliad and the Odyssey. The Iliad and the Odyssey. He wrote them in 750, and they document the Trojan War, which happened in the 13th, 12th century, around 1250 or something like that. That's when all this occurs. So think about it. When we've been talking about judges over here in the Bible in Palestine, we've been talking about the judges over here in the Greece area. There's battles going on, and there's the Trojan War. Now, all of us have heard the story of the Trojan War, right? Did you realize that the Trojan War was happening at the same time Judges was happening in the Bible? It's very interesting period. And then Homer writes all this down. In 750 BC, he writes all this down. Now, if you want to, I'm going to get a plug here, but be careful. If you want to see a really good movie about the Trojan War, there's a movie called Troy. It's an R-rated movie, be careful. But it's a really good movie about the Trojan War. Now, when I was doing my slides this week, my wife walks by and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing my slides for class." She said, "You doing some more of those boring slides?" And I'm like, "Look, I'm showing facts. I'm giving facts." She said, "Facts are so boring. Do something to make it non-boring." So this slide is for my wife. This is Brad Pitt in the movie Troy. It's about a 20-year-old movie. You know, that could be Roger Davis when he was younger. I may have got that. I may have got that. You had a lot of hair back when you were 30s. I may have missed on that. But there's Brad Pitt in the movie Troy playing Achilles. And if you know anything about the story of the Trojan War, Achilles and Hector of Troy get into a great battle, and it's that's for you, man. That's for you. Not boring. Now, here's the map of Greece. It's probably kind of hard to see, but I just kind of want to show you that. Here is traditional Greece, okay? Here's Athens. Here's Corinth. All these are led by leaders, and they're very powerful city-states. Now, Troy, here's Ephesus. So this is Turkey. This is modern-day Turkey here. And right here, up in this area here, is Troy. So Troy's in Turkey, and here's Athens here, and they fight each other. That's a long way to go to have a fight, isn't it? But you can, when you read about the history of that, how Paris of Troy got the Helen of Greece, and they got into a big battle. It's always over a woman, it seems like, you know. And but see how now this is in 800 BC, how Crete here is really starting to exert itself. Now this is around 750, 800 BC. We get into 300 BC. Greece is really going to get powerful under who? Alexander. We're going to talk about that toward the end of the week. But just showing you that the power structure in the world now, while all this is going on over here in Judah and Israel, there's other things going on in the history of the world. Now, 744, Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria. So Shalmaneser's gone, Tiglath-Pileser's come in. He is documented in the Bible as Pul. He's called Pul in the Bible. He is a real person. So this verifies the things the Bible tells us. And during this period, you see almost over a 100-year period, Assyria becomes a great power. Here is, I'll show you this map. Where we are now, this is where Tiglath-Pileser kind of started. See this area here. This area above here is called Urartu, and they end up taking that area too. But here's where we start. Down here, see, here's where we are, down here in Palestine, Judah and Israel. But Tiglath-Pileser starts here, and by the end of the 700, they've got all of this. They take over all of this. So you can see how really powerful Assyria is coming at this point in time. And poor little Judah is stuck down here. Okay, so all right, so 742, Pekahiah becomes king of Israel. 740, Jotham, you can read that. Pekah. We're going to go into this more detail next week, Israel next week. But in 734, Tiglath-Pileser marches all the way. Where did I miss it? Did I go too far? Yeah, he's going to go. He's going to start his westward and going to go down here. Eventually, he's going to take over Damascus. He's going to go to Gaza, and then eventually, we'll see he's going to come into the Palestine area. And then Hoshea assassinates Pekah again. Ahaz becomes king in Judah, and then Shalmaneser lays siege to Samaria, 725, and then eventually Samaria at this time, Israel falls to the Assyrians in 722. We're going to go into that more detail next week because that's very important. So now let's back up a little bit. Let's back up to kind of the start of the 8th century, and let's take Judah down through the 8th century, and then next week we'll pick up on Israel, take them down there. So we get into Joash, and Joash was he was 7 years old when he became king because of all the death and assassination we was talking about. 7 years old. He had a high priest named Jehoiada who was his guardian, was his mentor, kind of maybe ruled the country a little bit. But Jehoash was a good king. Then he became a bad king. But he started out as a good king. And he repaired the temple, did a lot of good stuff there to the temple. We see during this period how the temple is repaired, destroyed. And it's just a cycle that we go through. Now, during this period, the king of Syria was Isaiah, as we talked about before. He took over some of Israel's lands on the west side of the Jordan, and they came into Judah there. But God kind of spared them. Israel was saved from Hazael, king of Syria, coming down into that area. Israel was saved because Joash gave some of the artifacts of the temple to Hazael, the king of Syria. And we're going to see this a lot, that there must have been a lot of stuff in the temple. Because when we see once these guys become vassals, they give a lot of stuff from the temple to these kings. So we see it here too. And after the Syrians left, Joash got gravely ill, and he was slain while he was in his bed. He was slain by two of his servants. He was buried. He was not buried in the tomb of the kings, but ironically, the high priest Jehoiada was buried in the tomb of the kings, which is very interesting. Okay, now Joash's son Amaziah succeeded him as king, and this kind of begins, and we'll talk about this later. So this is 796. So starting in the 8th century, we see both Judah and Israel are both in pretty good shape. The next two kings, Jeroboam II, takes over in Israel. We'll talk about him, and Amaziah here. And they have a pretty good reign there going for a while. The best that the two countries have been at the same time since Solomon's day. So over 100 years, all this intrigue and battle and everything going on. Finally, it settles down about 796 for both countries, but it doesn't last long. It doesn't last long. Amaziah took over Eden. He went to war against them and took Eden back. Then, in a shocking display of stupidity, Amaziah started sacrificing to idols. And urged on by some of his princes and mercenaries, he challenged Joash, the king of Israel. And much smaller, but he challenged Joash. And they met at Beth Shemesh near Tel Aviv, near present-day Tel Aviv. And Amaziah and Judah was totally, utterly defeated. And they gave more of the stuff from the temple to Jehoash, as they had done. Amaziah was taken captive, taken back to Jerusalem. See again, Jehoash, he took treasures from the temple, went back to Samaria, and he died very soon after that. And then a little bit later, Amaziah died. He was there was a coup, and a conspiracy was formed against him. He was overtaken at Lachish and was killed there, and his body was taken back to Jerusalem. So we see for a while everything was going pretty good, but Amaziah kind of got a little arrogant there and tried to do something. Now we get into Uzziah, who was a good king, and he succeeded his father. There was kind of a cold reign in there for a while. Uzziah was one of the most ablest of all the kings, and served the Lord well. He was under the influence of the prophet Zechariah. He repaired a lot of the temple again. He repaired the city. He went down to Ezion-Geber, which is one of the places right there on the top of the Red Sea where the Israelites camped while they were on their exodus, where Solomon built up a great navy port. That navy port had been kind of run down, and Uzziah built that back up. He repaired the walls to Jerusalem that had been torn down during the battles, and he prepared them for attack. So he built Jerusalem back up, and he was getting it really in good shape, good situation. But man, he can't stand his own prosperity. So he tried to take over some of the functions of the priest. He went into the temple. He started burning sacrifices, and the priest told him, "You can't do that." He went into the holy place to burn incense upon the altar. And they kept telling him, you can't do that. You're not supposed to do stuff like that. And while he was in there and the priests were talking to him, suddenly leprosy came upon him. And he remained a leper to the day of his death. He was not buried with the other kings. He was buried in a field near Jerusalem. Now, what's interesting, about Uzziah here, he was a good king, but he's just kind of lost his way there a little bit. My grandson had senior night at football this week, and he had to fill out this little questionnaire. What do you want to be when you grow up? Stuff like that. And one of the questions I asked him was, what's your favorite Bible verse? So when he was filling it out, I said, what is your favorite Bible verse? Do you have a favorite Bible verse? What is your favorite? And he said, yeah, it's Isaiah 6, 1 through 8. We're going to read that. In the year that King Uzziah died, we've already saw where he got the leprosy and he died. Isaiah was about 18 years old at this point. I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne. And the train of his robe filled the temple. Can you imagine this? I want you to picture this as I read it. Picture in your eye. The train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, and they covered their feet. And with 2 they were flying, and they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorpost and threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Now, whether it was smoke or whether it was a cloud, it was the glory of God. Woe to me, I cried. I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. In other words, I'm a sinner, and I'm living in a land of sinners. And now my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar, and with it he touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away from you. Your sin is atoned for. Touching the lips did not forgive his sins, did it? What forgave his sins? Grace. The same thing that forgives our sins. God's grace forgives our sins. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here am I. Send me. That's a great verse. I was proud of my grandson for picking that. And that happened now, in this very time we're talking about, in the year King Uzziah died. So now at 750, we get to 751, we see Jotham, 25 years old. He reigned for a while with his father, I guess because his father had the leprosy. So he reigned with him for a while. He was one of the best. He was one of the best kings. Very pious, very prosperous. But his people just kept getting more corrupt and more corrupt. Then we see where King Pekah of Israel aligned with King Rezin of Damascus, and they started to attack Judah during the last days of Jotham's reign. And then we get into the reign of his son Ahaz, the 11th king of Judah. And just as Jotham, Uzziah and Jotham were really good kings, Ahaz was one of the worst. He was just a horrible king. He made images of Baal. Man, look at this. We talked about this, remember when we talked about the foreign gods. He sacrificed his own children to the god Molech. Now, he's the lowest of the low, right? He has hit the bottom as compared to these other kings. When you start sacrificing your own children. And I talked about Pekah and Rezin, how they attacked him. The Lord used those people to punish Ahaz. He used those two countries to punish Ahaz. The Lord uses people to punish people. And he used Assyria. He's going to use Assyria to punish Israel. But at this point in time, he uses Pekah and Rezin to punish the people of Judah and Ahaz. Now, Jerusalem was spared mainly, or a big part of it, was because of Isaiah. So this is the time that Isaiah is prophesying to the people there, and he's getting through to some of the people. So the fact that Isaiah is prophesying, and the people are listening to him. Jerusalem is spared. Jerusalem is spared from this two things coming at him. It was during this period here that Isaiah probably wrote Isaiah 7, when he talks about the birth of a child named Emmanuel. God is with us, and that all happened about this time we're talking here. I found it really interesting. If you read Isaiah 8. He had a second sign, and God told him to give the name of his child Mahushala-Hashbaz. May the speed of the spoil hasten to the prey. That's what that literally is. If God comes to you and says, name your son Mahushala-Hashbaz, you might say, well, Lord, can't we come up with something a little shorter than that, But this is from God because it really meant something. Now, so we see here where Pekah and Rezin, they left Jerusalem after that because they could not defeat Jerusalem, and they left and they went back. And we see here that the prophet Obed came to them, and he reproved them because they were taking back children, some of the children they had captured, some of the women they had captured, and he met the armies there, and they released the children and the women and allowed them to go back to their places. Now, while this was going on, while this battle was going on, Ahaz felt so under siege that he needed help. So who did he ask for help? Assyria. Man, that's like a camel getting his nose under a tent, right? Assyria, we saw what they've already done to Damascus. We saw what they've come into Gaza, and Ahaz asked Assyria for help. Now he's invited Assyria into Judah, which is an absolute mess. And while he was doing that, Assyria completely took over Damascus. Damascus had been a powerful nation for about 250 years, and Tiglath-Pileser completely took over Damascus, ended the kingdom of Damascus. And so that's what we saw on the map, how they expanded his kingdom. Took over part of Galilee and came on down into Judah to help. So we can see then that was not a good idea on his point. And to pay him back, see, that's where it says Tiglath-Pileser to help him. Yeah, and during this time, the prophet Micah, if you want to read the prophet Micah, he was during this time. So to pay Tiglath-Pileser for doing this, you know what he did? He gave him more stuff from the temple. I don't know how there's anything left in this temple the way these kings are giving it away. But he gave him stuff from the temple. He gave him some of the gold. He gave him some from the artifacts. They cut some of it in pieces, and God was really angry with Ahaz at this point. Remember, he's the worst of the worst. And God was really angry, and God was just about to turn them over, and then he decided not to. He decided that he would spare them for a while, and the next king coming up is a king called Hezekiah, who ended up being a good king. So God spared Judah for now, but not for long. So now here we are. We're getting down to this point. So for the first time in over hundreds of years, the two kingdoms are really in good shape, but they could not last. They could not stay long. Here's just to refresh your memory. Here's Judah again. Here's Israel, and here's where Assyria is starting to take over some of this. But now we're to the point now where, at this point, when Jeroboam was king and where Uzziah was king, it was Israel and Judah were at its peak, the best they'd been since the days of Solomon, over 100 to 150 years ago. But obviously, it's not lasting that long now with the things that Ahaz did. And so next week, what we're going to do, we're going to go back up and we're going to pick up Israel. We're going to start with Jeroboam 2. We're going to pick up Israel around 793, and we're going to trace what's happening in Israel 793 till we get down to 722, when Israel no longer is a nation. All right, any questions? That's a lot. That's quick. You get this in Kings and Chronicles. You can't read just one of the books. You've got to read Kings and Chronicles. If you've got a good chronological Bible that puts them together, that really, really is helpful to follow along with this when they do that. We're one of the books we're using, and we're using a lot of books, but one of the books we're using is a Wim Smith book, History of the Old Testament, which is an old book. And that's where we're getting these dates. If you want, you can look at multiple things on the internet, you'll see multiple dates. And it's really, you go crazy trying to figure out all these dates. So we just decided we're going to use Wim Smith's chronology, and that's the dates we're using from his book. That's another really good book, The History of the Old Testament. So we're going to leave you there now. Next week, we're going to pick up with Jeroboam. We're going to go through the final days of the kingdom of Israel. Any questions? You want to see the Brad Pitt picture again? No. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day.